Good afternoon, friends. Burak is just joining. I think he's in.
Yes,
Here
I can hear you, Gagan. Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hello. I leave it to the people from the college to take care of the
Oh,
session, Burak.
thank you very much. Just one
Okay.
question before they take on. How can I share my slides? I'm using it for the first time.
Right. You right-click on the screen where you are seeing the participants. What are you seeing? Are you seeing me or are you seeing someone on the screen?
I have just small images of everyone, but
On
I don't
the
see you.
in the center, are you seeing someone? No.
No.
So you just click in the center, maybe right click in the center, and on the bottom there will be something called meeting details, and then turn on captions and present now.
Oh, because
Right
I'm
click.
using a tablet, that's why.
I know. So just right click, just maybe double click, and there is an option of present now.
Let me try.
It's on the right top with three dots.
Shall I, shall I my screen to
The
let you know,
the
Burak?
these are the three dots on the top, sir.
Uh,
Three dots on the top of the screen.
yeah,
You
Please
just
press that.
can you see
Right,
present now?
but I don't see any
right hand side.
sharing the
No, you will get
documents thing.
present now, Burak. Present now.
Uh, okay,
Third option is present screen.
I don't see any
Can you
present
see the
now
three dots?
option. I click the three dots, but I just see change the camera, include subtitles, show the screen, adjust for light, and so on. So I don't see
I
anything
think
with.
show the screen is the one.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can see your screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very
So,
good.
I leave it to
I
them to start
can.
proceeding.
Okay.
Yeah, I can
Right.
try to. Thank you, Gagan.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So I welcome you all to the second session of the FDP. And before we proceed with the second session, which will be hosted by Dr. Burak, Dr. Gagan Deep Sharma, he wants to share something with all the participants. So, Dr. Gagan.
Yeah, I just wanted to share more with Burak rather than with the participants.
Okay. All right.
We could not speak because he had a session.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. So, welcome you all, and especially I extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Burak Erkut. Telling something about Dr. Burak. Dr. Burak is an assistant professor and a fellow of the Institute for Research in Economics and Fiscal Studies, Paris, France. And he has studied economics and management science from Leipzig University, Germany. And today in this session, he shall be guiding and leading us through the process of defining a research problem in the light of theoretical frameworks. So, for proceeding further for this session, over to Dr. Burak.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. So, hello everyone, I'm Burak, and very glad to be here with you. Very glad that we would be exchanging good vibes with each other, and that we would be talking a lot about defining the research problem. Can you see my slides now?
Not really, Burak. Your screen is not visible. There is something which is probably, yeah, now we can see your
Now
screen.
you can see. Very good. Very nice.
Burak, I need half a minute before you proceed further.
Yeah, sure. Take your time, whichever way.
Yeah,
Is
I just wanted to share with you, Burak, the broad idea of this workshop.
yeah, I would be very glad to hear from that.
Yeah, so in fact, Dr. Ajay Sharma, who was previously at the SD College Chandigarh, I hope you recall when we visited.
Yeah, of
when
course, of
you
course.
visited. So he is the principal of this college now, and he has the visionary approach through which he wanted that the faculty of his college be trained to write the research papers practically.
Mm-hmm.
So we have designed this program in such a way that we can guide the faculty to practically approach the research. And
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that by the end of this workshop, they should be able to write their own research papers. And this is required not only for their individual growth, but also for the institutional growth. You know, the rankings
Mm-hmm.
and
Of course.
so those frameworks all over the world. So in the morning, I shared with them about how individual performances can be grown and the
Mm-hmm.
institutional performances can be grown. So my only request and advice to you is to keep the session practical and the two-way
Yeah.
as we usually do. I know you usually do it that way.
Yeah.
So that is the broad idea, Burak. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Gagan. I'm very glad to be among young scholars, among scholars of the college, and to have a two-way interaction, as Gagan says, regarding the research. And I saw today early a little bit of your presentation. I was keeping my stuff from the university because we are changing our campus, so that's why I couldn't watch it all, but I think it was a very nice contribution as a start. So I will take over from there, and I will be doing it as a very intuitive presentation. So there are, of course, some slides, and there would be assignment, if that is okay, for Monday session, but I will be doing it very intuitively. And I will be also talking about my own experience as a PhD candidate, later on as a postdoc. And of course, no matter what title you carry, you always read good and bad papers, good and bad research papers. So as a referee, I read a lot of papers. I need to make my judgment about them, whether they are publishable or not, or whether what kind of revisions these papers would require, and so on. So I would be telling a lot from the personal perspective, and I think this could make a difference, not just having some standard slides, which everyone can plan according to the literature, but also sharing some personal experience, if that would be okay for everyone. Okay, so let's start with who am I. There was a brief introduction. Thank you for that. So I studied at Leipzig University in Germany in the undergraduate economics and management, in master's economics. Did the PhD at the elite university, Dresden University of Technology, also in Germany, on product innovation and market shaping. And among others, I had some research visits in Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, All India Institute of Medical Science, both in India, in the very nice country of India, and York University in Canada. I have been a guest editor of Sustainability Journal, which is an SSCI journal with an impact factor of around 2.9. And I'm currently a section editor of the journal Mathematics, which is an Sciences Expanded Index journal for the section Financial Mathematics. So, of course, you can see I didn't study mathematics, but my PhD was with graph theoretical, with mathematical components. So that was the reason why I had joined the journal. And of course, the issue is that I'm sharing these information regarding journals because I would be giving some examples from my own editorship and refereeship. Okay. Now, of course, our topic is defining the research problem. So, first of all, let's start with a few thoughts on what can be the research. So, what are we doing there? What is the duty that we are doing? So, for example, according to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, a research is any creative, systematic activity to increase the stock of knowledge, including knowledge of the man, culture, and society, and the use of this knowledge to devise new applications. Okay, so actually we would be doing something in our research to increase our knowledge about something. And this should be knowledge, the new knowledge that we have in our research should be relevant for new applications. In other words, it shouldn't be about something that nobody cares about. And it should be something that devises new applications. This is a definition from OECD, not exactly the research institute, but an important international institution. John Crosswell, important research methodologist, defines it as a process of steps used to collect and analyze information to increase our understanding of a topic or an issue. Okay, so we want to understand something better, and for that we are doing our research. We would be doing our research. What are the steps? First, we pose a question. Second, we collect the data to answer the question. So this can be an empirical research, this can be an experimental research, but it can be also based on a review of the literature or a theoretical review. And third, we present an answer to the question. So we did all of these steps. What do we learn? What was the answer? And of course, the relevance is the most important thing in that. Now, Groth and Wang define it as a systematic inquiry directed towards the creation of knowledge. So in all of the definitions that I present, we always try to increase our knowledge on something when we are doing our research. And this should be something that is relevant, that didn't just fall from the sky, for which we recognize what has been done until now and what has remained unanswered. And we can have a scientific or a systematic approaches to study a problem. An acceptable approach to acquire dependable and useful information about problem is so we can then analyze the information. So our approach should be about collecting information, and we should collect the information that gives us an idea on the answer of the problem. Also, we must interpret this information. What does it mean for us and what are the implications? So this can be about a topic that has not yet been written with some prior knowledge. So there has been some inquiries, but a question remained unanswered. Or this can be about something for which we are challenging the results. Maybe we are challenging the assumptions, or maybe we are challenging the behavior of people. In other words, we are trying to show that the results that has been shown until now is not relevant for all cases. Maybe we have something different. Okay, so a very important question to ask is the research really meaningful? So no matter what your discipline is, research is a systematic and an objective research for reliable information. And one of the most important questions that we should ask is it really meaningful? I mean, maybe for scholars such as yourselves, this makes a lot of sense and this is very straightforward. But both as a referee and as an editor and as a guest editor, and also within my conference visits, I saw lots of papers, I heard lots of presentations where the research was not meaningful. It was either extremely derivative, so topics that have been popular 5 years ago, for which we do not have anything new. So they did not add any added value to the research. They just showed the same research with a different data for which the results were the same. Or the research question and the implications were different from each other. So they defined a research question, but they did something completely other, and they didn't notice it. Or it was something that was so obvious that the research was not interesting. So results that we knew, results that we could anticipate in highly theoretical mathematical models that were actually, well, how to say it? I mean, if you can do things simpler, if you can explain a phenomenon simpler, why do you need so many complicated models when the answer is very obvious? So this is something very important to ask, and especially among economists, which is my discipline. There is always a tendency to make things very, very complicated, to have very highly mathematical models, which are, of course, I mean, don't get me wrong, mathematical modeling is important, but sometimes economists make them extra complicated even for very simple answers. What do I mean? There was a study regarding childcare and municipal roles. So are municipalities offering childcare facilities or not? And this was a very highly complicated model, required a lot of mathematical aspects. And the guy found out that when municipality offers childcare facilities, the childcare in that town is better. And I mean, of course, important results, but maybe you can show it in a simpler way. Maybe you can show it simply with some interviews, or you can simply show it with the perception of the households regarding the quality of their childcare, and so on. So you may not need something very highly complicated just to show you that you can. I mean, don't get me wrong, don't take the you as yourself in that case. So of course, one can have very good skills in mathematics and mathematical modeling, but the important thing, and we are going to see more on that, is that what do we need to answer the question? So how can we answer the question, and what tools do we need? We don't just have mathematical models, we may have some qualitative studies as well. We would be seeing more on that. But so far, if there are any questions, please pose. Please tell me if there are any questions. From time to time, I would be checking whether anything is written. Okay. Now, I mean, remember the title of our topic is to focus on the research problem, how to formulate a research problem and how to conduct. And for that, of course, it is important to pose the question of why do we have a research problem? So the problem is always associated with something negative. You know, there is the movie The Problem Child, and there is, there is the saying, Houston, we have a problem, to the Houston space base in Texas, and so on. So it is, why should we have a problem with research? And of course, you would be seeing, no matter what the topic you choose, if you do a carefully conducted research, at the start you want to answer something very big, and at the end you would see that you only answered a very simple dimension of the big problem, and there have been a lot of questions that have not been answered yet. This doesn't mean that you are doing anything wrong. On the contrary, this simply means that you are doing things right. Why? Because when you are conducting research, when you carefully conducted the research according to the rules, according to the conventions, you would know that actually the phenomena in our world are very, very complex to answer it in a single research question, no matter what you are trying to answer. But you still do it because you have a certain sort of curiosity. You read the literature about a certain topic, and you notice that something has not been answered yet that you are curious about. So you want to find out the answer, and you know that the answer would be relevant for our knowledge base, so you want to make a contribution to the knowledge base. But this can be also something that, I have a problem with these assumptions, or I want to challenge these assertions. So maybe you want to challenge the assumption that in economic models, people are modeled as rational human beings. Maybe you want to have a theoretical model in which you are having very emotional human beings. So this is about challenging an assumption. Okay, so the problem in this setup does not mean that there is something negative about it. It just simply means that we have something for which we didn't have an answer, or we have something which we want to challenge because we believe the contrary is true, or we have something about which we are curious. So it only means that there has been something that wasn't done yet, and we want to change this. This is about the so-called research problem. However, don't get me wrong, we always have a lot of questions in our minds, but not all questions in our minds can be transferred into research problems. So I remember my time in Germany, in the very nice and beautiful city of Dresden, where I was doing my PhD. There is a very big river, the river Elbe. And I was always, when I was fed up with my work at the office, we had flexible hours, I was always going to the river either to run or to take a walk. And when I was doing this, of course, I was on my own, and I was free from everything. I was free from the office. I was free from the papers that I read there. I was free from the computer. So many ideas appeared in my mind about my research, or about things that I didn't talk about. I didn't see the connection beforehand. And this was a very nice feeling, running on the riverside, observing your surroundings, smelling the river, noticing the sun and the wind, and at the same time, you have a whole different world inside your mind. Something that has nothing to do with the river or the sun or the bridges or the wind or the smell of the river or the fish that you see. Something completely different regarding your research. So this is something nice, and this showed me how to do the brainstorming on my own. And this is actually something that is, clearing up your mind and leading you to think out of the box. But at the end, you would notice, maybe you walked for 2 hours or you ran for 1 hour, that not all questions that appeared in your mind can be transferred into the research problem. So of course we have a lot of ideas, and this is very nice. But first of all, what we have in our minds needs to be transformed to the right question. So maybe you thought of process innovations in industry, but maybe you transfer into a question of process innovations in general, so you don't have the industry assumptions in your mind. Or the process of transforming these ideas not only to the right question, but a question that we can also answer. This is a big challenge. So, and believe me, how can I formulate it? Sometimes you think that a question is answerable, but at the end, you are fed up that you can't get any data on it. So, to give an example from my own research, so we were trying to find out startups who were focusing on the traditions and the cultures of Cyprus, where I'm currently located in. So it was a very nice idea, and we tried to transform it to the right question, but we simply couldn't get so much data. So we distributed around 30 surveys. We only got 5 surveys in return. So when you don't have any data, this is a problem. And you would be seeing, of course, working with data has its fun sides and has its difficult sides. But you would be seeing and noticing that whether the question is answerable or not, this is a big challenge. And of course, I would be giving some more examples on that. But so far, any questions from your side? Okay. Now, of course, we all make some mistakes when we are formulating a research problem. And these mistakes doesn't mean that you are doing something wrong. These mistakes are part of your research journey. So you do something wrong, you learn from your mistakes, and you move on. Sometimes you notice it at a very early point. Sometimes you notice it later on. And of course, seeing how things not work is also part of the research. So don't get frustrated when things do not work. I remember a lot of data analysis where the correlations that I suggested did not appear. Of course, I was frustrated, but then apparently it was a misformulation of the questions. So the questions were not perceived by the audience in the same way that I meant to. So we changed that. And after that, of course, this was quite okay. But you are frustrated when things do not work. This is just like when you are trying to, make a picture, or when you are trying to make a very nice Indian meal, but maybe you put some quantities in the wrong way, so this tastes something different. Or maybe you undercooked the rice, or maybe you overcooked the rice. So we all make our mistakes in our lives, and research is not an exception. Research is part of the rule. So the first big mistake is thinking that it is very easy to formulate a research problem and transform it into a question. This has 2 dimensions. So first of all, you can formulate it, but you would notice it maybe at one point that it is not relevant. The research is somewhere else, and maybe the topic that you are referring to is not so interesting for anyone or relevant for anyone. And second, thinking that you are the first who is addressing the same, who is addressing this question. So you need to have really a deep understanding of the literature. And of course, you can try to use the databases, for which I think more would be coming up. But the problem is, if you use the wrong keywords, or if you use the wrong terminology, or if you don't know the terminology, so if you don't have enough knowledge of the subject, this can turn out to be very, very problematic. So not having enough knowledge of the subject can be a problem. Of course, you visit the lectures, you get some knowledge on some subjects, but doing the literature review, taking a look at who wrote what on this topic, is much complicated then. And believe me, sometimes we always see that, well, the research changes the terminology over time. So for example, I'm teaching in the autumn semester an MBA lecture on strategy, leadership and strategy. And when I'm giving some homework to my MBA students who are, grown-ups, who already have some work experience and so on, I tell them to be careful with the choice of the journals for which they would extract the knowledge. For example, the most important journal in the field of strategy has the name Long Range Planning. And this is actually something that, when you hear about it, you think about some military planning or some inventory planning of, some logistics company and so on. But this was the terminology that was used for strategy 50 years ago. So they opened up the journal with that name in 1950s, and later on, apparently, this became a big hit, and they didn't dare to change the name. The same with the terminology. So maybe what you are meaning in your mind, what you are meaning with your query, has a certain terminology, has a certain term in the literature that you don't know, or maybe you mix things up. So these are all possible issues that can occur. And third issue is not having enough knowledge of research methods. And this can also occur. So maybe the methods that you learn only favor quantitative methods. So sometimes PhD advisors tell their students, I'm only doing quantitative and I don't think with qualitative research you can have any meaningful results. So this can cause you a lot of trouble. Why? Because maybe the research problem that you would like to answer can be conducted by a qualitative research, but you don't know about it. So, of course, these things imply that, of course, the lectures or the courses that you are visiting are quite important, but you need to spare some more time on the issues for which you are curious about. So not everything can be taught in lectures, not everything can be taught in courses, but also sometimes you need to learn things. For example, myself, I wrote my bachelor's thesis by using the programming language R, which is a statistical package, and I didn't have any courses on that. So my supervisor simply told me back then, take some more time, learn it on your own. And this was, of course, a very big challenge because, working with codes, working with a programming language, I don't know if we did it already, but this can cause you a lot of trouble even when you write a comma instead of a point. And you receive funny error messages for which you don't know what it means. So, in other words, the development of the individual continues also after the lecture, after the graduation, and so on. And the development is always open. But, of course, no matter how careful we are, human beings are prone to making mistakes. So it's important not to avoid mistakes, but to learn from them. Okay, and of course, one of the big challenges is that to understand the complexity of the problem. For this, I brought an example. I'm not sure if you came across it. So this is the so-called SACCM framework. SACCM stands for socialization, externalization, combination, and internalization. So the research question sounds very simple. How do we learn new things? And this has, of course, two dimensions. So one dimension is tacit or to explicit, or the other dimension is tacit from explicit. Okay, so this can occur, and this is a very famous framework by Nonaka, also published in Long Range Planning, the journal, so something coming from strategy literature. This simply tells us that sometimes people learn things from observing and turn them into written things, or sometimes they read things and they think of new ideas and they communicate these ideas. So the idea is very simple, but to find out this model, of course, this requires a lot of time, a lot of exploration into the literature to see what is missing. Okay, so far, any questions or any comments from your side? Now, there are further challenges for the research problem, and one of them is formulating an idea which can transform our problem into a researchable question. Again, something that has to do with what are the conditions of our research? How are you going to conduct the research? Maybe you need to get some data which you cannot receive, or maybe your model is so complicated that you cannot have any known model that you can use in econometric literature. Or maybe the question is so wide that doing a literature review on your own and you wouldn't capture everything. And the other thing is, of course, it has something to do with human nature. So all of them have something to do with human nature, but especially being patient about the problem has something to do with human nature. So some of us are not very patient, where we are high-tempered. Others are very patient, very calm individuals. So myself, I am from time to time, but I also learned patience. So, when I was in Amritsar and we were at the Golden Temple, we were just watching the beautiful view, very silent, with a lot of deep thoughts in the minds. So you need to calm down, and this was one of the places where I remember from one of my India visits how I could learn a little bit to calm down. Okay, so I mean, what has personality to do with the research problem? So of course, remember what you are formulating, what you are going to do with research is your own work. So this means that you are actually doing something that is very subjective, and if you are not patient about the problem, if you just want to do a paper within 3 or 4 days, of course you can do it. But as long as you don't have any superpowers, it will turn out to be wrong in many dimensions. So I will give you the example without giving the name about a colleague of mine whom I got to know, another economist lady, whose mother was the undersecretary of the Ministry of Economics in a country. And through her mother, she had a lot of connections. So she got the data set, which was never absolutely to be given out to any researcher, from the Ministry of Economics about patents in different parts of that country, how many patents in which dimensions, in which sectors, and of course, I mean, patent data is something public, but with a lot of private information about the founders, their firms, firm size, and so on. So very detailed data set. And of course, because she didn't collect the data on her own, she just decided to do principal component analysis, which is a statistical method on that data set to answer a question that appeared to her that is perfect, and with that she would be done with her PhD within 1 year. Okay, and the first presentation with this data set and with the ideas, of course, which went out very wrong. So not only she didn't understand anything about the data, but also the research problem that she mentioned had many answers in the literature that she didn't know about. And also the data analysis was giving something else than the initial question that she posed. And of course, data on its own had a lot of problems. So for some of the aspects of data, she couldn't use that method. And what she found out was, of course, nonsense. So when a guest professor told her that at the end of the presentation, she went out crying and she didn't come back for a few days to her office. And of course, this is very bad. This is not good. So I mean, the same mistakes you can do also after 3 or 4 years. But being patient about the problem has something to do with making sure that the literature really has this gap, really has this question that no one answered. Making sure that you are transforming this into a researchable question with the proper methods, with the proper literature, with the proper framing of the problem, and you are patient. Why? Because you may notice things in your first round of research that actually, okay, I'm not sure if this method is okay, or I'm not really sure if with this method I'm answering the right question, so maybe the method is okay, but I'm answering something else, and so on. And of course, this requires not only being patient, but being open to the feedback. She wasn't so open, so she defended everything she did, and at the end, of course, there was nothing to defend, and she went out crying. Not something nice, of course, don't get me wrong, but the issue is that, of course, we have the problem of being open to feedback. So not all persons who would give you the feedback would have a nice means. There can be persons who have very bad means and who want to destroy you. But I would say, from my experience, the vast majority of people, they really pose their questions because they didn't understand your research, so they're not trying to be mean, which would require you to, take a look at your own presentation skills, which you would be teaching, which you would be exercising, or they want to give you very honest feedback, but if you are not so open to that, of course, you may think they really mean bad of you. But I would say vast majority of cases, this is not the case, so they are not really mean people, they are not really bad people, but they just want you to improve your research. And of course, this requires not only patience with yourself, but also patience with other people. Patience with people who see your research very different from yourself. So maybe they are not familiar with the methods, or that's why they didn't understand, or maybe you didn't communicate it properly. Which, some people are naturally born, naturally talented communicators, but you can also learn this skill. It's not something that we cannot learn. I also learned, so over time, at the beginning, my presentations were including, let's say, 5 paragraphs on one slide, and with the font 9 Times New Roman, and I wasn't even done with some of the presentations in given time. But over time, the more you tell about your research, the more you tell about your idea, and the more you receive qualitative feedback, the more you can learn about being patient about the problem. Okay, now in the following, I would be focusing a little bit on the stages of scientific method and on formulating the research problem one by one. Okay, so remember, we have some problems, we have some questions, we have some research, and we are looking for a solution. So maybe we would like to make a 360 degrees round coming from the problems to the questions and research, and from there to the solution. And maybe even after solution, there should be some further problems for which you would be answering in another research, or someone else would answer. So the research itself is never complete. And that's what is meaningful about it. So you can always add up to the relevant knowledge base. Okay, so far, any questions or any comments from your side, guys?
Burak, Gagan here.
Yeah, hello, Gagan.
Hi, Burak. I have a small kind of comment and kind of query as well. Thank you very much. So far, it has been very spot on, and you have talked a lot about the problem formulation, which is a very real issue with us all. One of my concerns is that if you can take a practical example, say, for example, take the example of any theory of evolutionary economics which we work in. and contextualize any research which we did together. Say, for example, you can take the revisiting paper, the one that we wrote for humanomics. Maybe you can open, or if you want, I can open the file and show them the file, the title of the paper, and see how theoretically we are aligned with the theory of evolutionary economics through that
Sure.
paper.
I mean, I had the paper for options later on, but of course you can open the paper on humanomics. I think that's also a very nicely written paper. I don't have it on the tablet, but if you can open it, that should be also very interesting.
I'll just open it for you, but there is some issue. Just a second. There is some issue. I'm not able to see anything right now.
Oh, also myself not?
Nothing. Are you able to see something right now?
I'm seeing you and I'm seeing myself on the screen, but I'm not sure why no one else can see.
I'm only talking to you. I'm unable to see anything on my screen right now. I'm afraid I'll have to log out and then log in. So I'll be back. But as soon as I get back, I'll open the humanomics paper for you.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Burak, I'm back and I can see you now.
Hello, Gagan.
Shall I open the humanomics paper now?
Yeah, that would be perfect, Gagan.
Okay. Here you go, Burak.
Oh, very nice. Very good. So, would you like to say a few words on that, Gagan, or should I go on first, whichever way you prefer?
Okay, so let me say, briefly talk about what this was, and then maybe you can carry on from there. So, friends, this is one paper. This is one paper which we published together, Burak, myself, and some of our colleagues from India, some of our colleagues from Germany. What we are doing in this is a project. What we were doing in this project was that we wanted to see that when individuals take financial decisions, which part of their brain gets activated? What is the activity in the brain? I hope you can recall and understand that the brain activity can be measured through magnetic resonance system, MRI. And it can also be measured through some other techniques like EEG. But we wanted to see what is the brain, what is the activity in the brain when you take the financial decisions. So we wanted to do some studies. We wanted to give people live tasks and perform their financial, their fMRI while they were doing some project which we were giving them. This paper was an attempt before the real experiments that we did. So what we did in this one was that we said that there is a plasticity. Plasticity is that your brain can be conditioned. So for example, if we keep on telling you all the time about research, 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 your brain will be conditioned to see research in everything and everything in research. So we were seeing that can the financial decision making, can we plasticize the financial decision making in the individuals? Can we plasticize individuals while taking their financial decision making? So this was broadly a conceptual paper, and it was accepted in the first revision itself. So, and it was published in Humanomics, which is a Q1. In the morning, we talked about Scopus quartiles. So it is a Q1 journal in Scopus. Burak can talk more about it, about the theoretical underpinnings of it.
Thank you very much, Gagan. So very nicely introduced paper, and this was one of the papers, one of the first papers that we worked on together. And as Gagan suggested, of course, our focus in the research project was a neuroscientific focus. However, if you have no theory, if you have no concepts, when you are doing the measurement, this is simply a measurement without any theory. This is just, you don't know what you're measuring. You don't know what you're referring to. So you would need a theoretical basis. And for that, we took a look at the literature on evolutionary economics, which is my primary field of research. Why? Because evolutionary economics itself focused on human beings, their cognition, their perceptions, in which it was not assuming all the human beings being rational or all the human beings thinking in the same way, which are the assumptions of the mainstream economic models. So from there, we took a look at the perception of human beings. According to the economic theory, how are people perceiving things? How are people making their decisions based on their environment? And so on. And this was the theoretical framework, and we tried to integrate it with plasticity literature, not only from the neuroscience, but also from marketing. So evolutionary economics has also an evolutionary marketing science dimension, which was saying not only that human beings have plastic brains, so being able to shape and respond thereafter, but also plastic markets. So we are able to shape the markets as well. And this was an integrative framework, meaning that we were trying to integrate these different streams of research, which is always, very challenging, because the assumptions of one direction of research does not mean that the other direction of research has the same assumptions. So you need to be careful about that, which we was. And of course, with conceptual papers, without any data, without any, hard facts, it's harder to get accepted in the first round, especially from a very famous Q1 journal as Humanomics. So on the right-hand side, of course, you can see that the name is IJOS, so it's the same journal, just renamed. So International Journal of Ethics and Systems is the new name, but known as Humanomics over the years. And this was something that, we wrote maybe for 5-6 months, I think. And something that was, that came from very different fields of research. So myself, I'm an evolutionary economist. My colleague Tuber Kaya, the second author, he is a knowledge management specialist. Marco Lehmann Rafferschmidt, he is a mathematician, mathematical economist. Mandip Mahendru, Gagandip Sharma, they are business scholars. Ashal Kumar Srivastava is a neuroscience professor at AIMS, and Mrinalini Srivastava is also a business scholar. So a very big variety of co-authors from different fields. Anything that I missed, Gagan?
I think that's very nice, and I think that's a very precise example of what I wanted you to share. Now, if you feel like, we can also take cases from these people, the attendees. What are they planning to work on, and we can probably suggest them the research question.
That would be very nice.
Yeah, but at the end of your presentation, of course.
Whichever way is preferable.
You continue with your presentation,
Okay.
but towards the end, maybe we can do that.
Okay. I would be then continuing. I mean, I would be continuing also with the example of options paper. So that can be hopefully also interesting for us. Just trying to share my screen again. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about stages of the scientific methods. The first stage is, of course, that we define the problem. So whatever the problem is, you must be able to do it in some way, collect and analyze data to draw the conclusion. So it must be researchable. And stating the problem in a way that avoids value judgment is usually a good place to begin. So it should be, the problem statement should be free of the judgmentals. Why? Because we want it to be a scientific research, not some biased research by our own judgments. Then we would need to formulate a hypothesis. So maybe you can say, I assume that the brand logos are influencing consumers' purchase behavior. This is a hypothesis that you would like to deliver, you would like to test using your research. And at this point, of course, I would ask if that would be okay also for you, Gagan, that our participants can also suggest some hypotheses for one of their research projects.
Absolutely.
Or we can do it later as well, whichever way you prefer.
So the way you want it, Burak.
Yeah, I mean, we can hear from some of our participants a hypothesis, if they have a working hypothesis, if that would be also interesting for them.
That should be fine, yes. So guys, if you want to share some of your hypothesis with us.
Some working hypothesis. I mean, it doesn't need to be a completely tested one. You know, just the idea to hear from you guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hi, Dr. Barak. This is Kamaljeet Singh from the Shri Aurobindo College of Commerce and Management, Ludhiana.
Welcome, Kamaljit. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much. Very good to hear from you. What would you like to share from us?
Yes, sir. Actually, I am working on some impact on the impact of diversification on the banking sector.
Mm-hmm.
So how the banks are how the diversification is impacting on the bank performance in India.
Mm-hmm. Very
so
interesting
it can be a
topic.
hypothesis that there is that it can be the positive or it can be a negative. So for that, this can be the one hypothesis that impact of diversification have a positive impact on the bank performance in Indian context.
Very interesting.
And the second question, sir, I would like to raise from your presentation as well. I thought that I will raise it at end, but in between now I got a chance. Now, in some papers, sir, when I used to read some paper, even some good journals, sometimes we find that it is even not relevant for today's studies, or it is not relevant for the practical management. But still, it have been accepted in a very good journal. Or sometimes the title generally sometimes we get a rejection that they say the title of the paper is not appropriate. But when we check out from the Vikalpa, it's even the journal of IIM Ahmedabad. Even in then I see it, sometimes the title of the paper is not able to give the grasp that what the paper wants to tell us about.
Mhm.
So if you can
Yeah,
answer this
very
question.
important
Thanks a lot, sir.
question, Kamaljit. Thank you for this question. So, short answer, of course, papers that are not relevant that still appear in the journals. I don't know, maybe sometimes also the editor has a certain power on, doing a favor to a friend. I mean, uh, this can also happen sometimes. So editors are not just completely free of being subjective, so they can act subjective sometimes. And also, second thing regarding the titles of the papers, I mean, this is a cultural thing. So, for example, Germans really want very, very straightforward titles that do not include any jokes or any, anything popular from the popular culture. The Americans want this. So Americans want you to make a very creative um, title, maybe sometimes something that is funny and something that makes people read it. So to give you two examples from the research of this type, so one of them, actually it is two papers that are associated together, both by the main author Sasha Becker. I think I can write his name to the chat. So German guy who published in American journals. So his first paper is called "Was Weber Wrong?" So he was challenging the hypothesis of Max Weber, the German sociologist, who said that the Protestant, so the evangelical Christian working ethics, leads to successful business management. And he was challenging this assumption. And the second one, even funnier, was called Luther and the Girls. So I wrote both names to the chat. So what was the second paper all about? I mean, you can think of all kind of things, but this was basically about Martin Luther, who was the founder of the evangelical Christianity in Germany, and who paid a lot of attention to the education of girls. So he built a lot of schools around Germany to make sure that girls are receiving proper education as well. So an early example of gender equality, but the title you don't recognize it from the title. So although the guy is German, both papers have been published in important American journals according to their standards of, having the titles. More of that I will come. Anyone else who would like to share his or her hypothesis? So from Kanwaljit, we heard that his hypothesis is that diversification has a positive impact on banking sector in India. Very interesting case.
Hello. Hello.
Kanwaljit?
Can you hear? Yes, sir. I'm here. So can I ask a second question as well?
Maybe I can continue, Kanwaljit, and we can do the questions at the end of the presentation. Would that be fine for you?
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Definitely.
you. Okay, so we already talked a little bit about hypothesis. Now, as important as your hypothesis is to take a look at your research strategy. So what methods are you going to use? How should your research instrument be designed and or method be structured for your project? Are you basing your work on an established theory? Are you replicating the works of others? Or what are you going to do? This is your research strategy. And you should be able to collect the data no matter what the nature of the data is, and you should be able to understand what the results mean. And of course, this is also something straightforward. You would say, of course, I would be understanding what the results mean. But sometimes, especially when you are doing analysis with big data, you may have some funny results which you cannot interpret. And finally, all should lead to the confirmation or to the rejection of the hypothesis. So just 2 days ago, I was a part of the jury of 2 master thesis defenses. One of them had some negative results, so she had to reject the hypothesis, but very carefully done, which which had further implications. So proving or disproving a hypothesis are both equally valuable and hopefully meaningful findings. Optionally, could be interpreting and using findings in design. So are your data useful for design or to draw conclusions about design? So this is as important as your hypothesis as well. And finally, reporting results, as your colleague already suggested, for example, with the title of the paper, this is something important and very highly cultural. So you should be able to draw conclusions, summarize findings, define future avenues of research, and identify limitations of your finding. Of course, these are universal issues, but for example, I think in the American way of writing a paper, you need to have the conclusions already at the introduction. In the European style, you have it really at the end. And Germans, for example, as part of West Europe, they are more interested in hard theory. The Americans mainly in hard facts. Okay, now let's take a look at the steps of formulating the problem, and after that we would be having some questions and of course one exercise for you to do it until Monday. So the formulating a research problem is the first and the most important step of conducting your research. Imagine your research problem as the foundation of your research building. So if your foundation is strong, the building is strong. And of course, one very short but very powerful way of always keeping it in our minds is if you want to solve the problem, you need to know what the problem is. One way is, of course, to train yourself on your own. Of course, you can do it also with your friends, but to train yourself to explain your research problem within 15 seconds. Hard thing to do is manageable. In most of the international conferences, you have 10 minutes allocated to you for your research, including 5 minutes of questions. So you have 5 minutes to explain your whole research, which, I don't know, maybe you did it in 3 or 4 years. Very hard thing. Second issue is an elevator pitch. What that is, I would be coming on later, so that would be your exercise. But let's just focus on how you formulate the research problem. Why? Because the research problem, the way you formulate it, has a causal effect on the following. So how you formulate it determines the following questions. What is the type of your study design? What is your sampling strategy? What is your research instrument? And what is your analysis strategy? In other words, the answer to these questions depend on how you formulate the research problem. And although, remember, we said our research problem should be free of own personal judgments, there is still a level of subjectivity in that. Of course, if you inappropriately formulate your research problem, this can cause you a waste of time and a waste of your resources. So, I mean, this was the case with the friend with innovation data, very nice data set. She didn't really formulate something as a result of her literature review. She just said, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm not interested in the literature. And of course, at the end, these were known results, and even the data analysis was not what she initially wanted to answer. And this was a waste of time and a waste of efforts. And of course, also, money, opportunity costs. You can do other things in that time. However, I mean, even if you inappropriately formulate a research problem, and you wasted some time, you can learn from the mistakes. So first is to understand and to discover different methods. So for example, the method I used, the graph theory, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to it during the masters, but when I started my PhD, we had a small reading group of PhD candidates. So we were reading one paper every week and discussing it among ourselves. And this was the start of myself discovering that this method can be useful. So not every method can be taught to you in your lectures. Second, framing your research from a different perspective. This can also influence the change in your research journey. So maybe until now you only focused on strategy literature, but leadership literature is better for you. So then things can change. And third, again, very important issue, you are doing your research alone, but you should always get some feedbacks. This can be from your professors, this can be from your friends, this can be from your colleagues, from some scholars, or I mean also from time to time, tell about your research to people who have nothing to do with your research. I sometimes talk to my research with our security guys. Why? Because they don't know anything about my research, but if I can explain them in a way in which they would understand it, as persons who didn't study economics, then I'm able to explain it to anyone else. And this can help me with my communication, but I can also get feedback from them. And this can, of course, influence the changes in your research journey, just to name a few of the factors. Now, let's focus on the steps. So the first step is, what is your general area of study or investigation? Of course, where to start, this can be regarding your interests, regarding the measurement of concepts, your level of expertise, the relevance of that field, availability of data or ethical issues, and so on. So there are some criteria called Matson's criteria for defining the area of interest. First, it must be an area which sustains your interest and which stimulates your imagination. Remember, you are going to spend a lot of time with it, so it should be something in which you are interested in. Second, this should be within your range of competencies, so you should be able to do this research. Of course, don't get me wrong, at the beginning of the research, maybe we are not familiar with the method or we never used the method before. This is okay, this is not a problem, but we should be able to develop our competencies in such a way that we learn it. Third, this should be something that is manageable in size. Fourth, it should have a potential to make a contribution to the body of knowledge. So people wouldn't say, okay, you made a research, but so what? Fifth, it should be based on obtainable data. If you can't obtain it, you can't do it. And finally, it should also demonstrate your independent mastery of both the subject and the method. Remember, when you are doing a presentation on it, when you finalize it, you are the only person in that room who spent most of the time with the subject and the method in this combination. So that should boost your self-confidence. Of course, now regarding titles, Kamaljit asked a question, so I would suggest to use the following single sentence to complete your thoughts by using 12 words or less if possible. So you should start with, my study is about. I mean, Kamaljit already did it. So he said, my study is about the impact of diversification on banking in India. Very nice. So this can become a working title for your research, and you can check whether it is researchable. For example, just to give you another one, my study is about the effect of brand logos on consumer purchasing and consumer perceptions and their purchase behavior. Okay, so maybe you can make some thoughts about using this sentence until Monday. So this is the first thing that I want you to do. Start with my study is about, and try to make a single sentence about your research. So Kanwaljit already did it. He can make some fine tunings on that, and the others, of course, first homework that. Now, the second step is, of course, narrowing the general topic down. So to use a specific statement of the research program and using a single paradigm if possible. So for example, the research that Gagan showed you, our common paper, was focusing on the paradigm of plasticity. And the topic and the research question, of course, they must be formulated before you have a thorough understanding of the research. This is a very big challenge for you. So maybe you did your MBA, especially in strategy, but your topic is taxation, which is, you know, this is something very paradoxical. So you need to formulate your topic and your research question before you are familiar with the literature, which is after you are done with the research. I mean, this is a challenge for you. This is a challenge in the nature of the research. That's why we call it research, not search, but research. But this is a challenge that you can tackle. How can you do it? So you can consult others who have some knowledge of the area and literature in the selected topic. You can talk to other and more experienced PhD candidates. You can visit presentations on the topic. For example, we had a Brownback seminar, we had a faculty seminar. There can be some talks of famous scholars on that issue that you can maybe see from the internet. And you can try to contact the presenters after their talk. So this works, in my knowledge, to 99%. So in my experience, just to give you a few ideas. So for example, I have contacts with Pisaridis, one of the Nobel Prize winners in economics. I went to a talk of Stiglitz, who is another Nobel Prize winner in economics, and right after the talk, we were able to communicate. So even very big shots, as long as they are nice persons, they talk back to you. And 1%, this can happen. Some, some professors, maybe they have a bad day, or maybe they have no time and forget to write you back, but it works 99%. Now, the literature review, of course, if you are not so familiar with the topic and the research, the literature review is usually limited at this point. So you must make wise choices about what to investigate, what to study, and what to explore. So is the topic better suited to a qualitative or a quantitative paradigm is another question that you should be able to answer. So, for example, if it is a previously studied topic with very much literature, you should be a quantitative research. If it is an exploratory study lacking theory base, you should be a qualitative research. But also a combination of both of the aspects is possible, so there is no very strict rules, but this can help you to identify the nature of the problem. Of course, if you are sure that it is lacking a theory base, it has not been previously studied before, you must make sure that this is really the case. Now, a good way to understand what is going on in the literature is to take a look at the so-called systematic literature reviews. What are they? As the name suggests, they involve a detailed and comprehensive plan and search strategy derived a priori in order to reduce bias by identifying, appraising, and synthesizing all the relevant studies on a particular topic. Very often, these include a meta-analysis component which involves using statistical techniques to synthesize the data from several studies into a single quantitative estimate or the summary exercise. What do I mean with that? I did this with Dr. Gagan and other co-authors. So what is it? I'm not sure if you can click the link. I don't think so. But I can tell you the name of the paper. So it is Research in Market Calibrated Option Pricing Analysis, a Systematic Review and Research Agenda. So what was it about? Let's take a look at its abstract. I wrote it here. So the aim was to consolidate and review the literature in the field of market-calibrated option pricing analysis in order to bring out the gaps in the current literature and make suggestions for future researchers in the field. What was the design? We took a look at the famous papers on systematic literature review. We reviewed around 1,500 papers written on this topic, and we collected them from 2010 to 2018. The paper was published in early 2019. What were the findings? Most of the research papers presented mathematical proposals to value options without actually validating it, calibrating it with real market data points. So we brought 5 important gaps in the current literature which could be explored further. And what was the originality? So this was really the first study that focused on the literature in the field of option pricing analysis in order to make a systematic review and to suggest directions for future researchers. So these systematic reviews, they are actually a very recent approach for business studies, so maybe 10 years old. Gagan, can I say that? 10 or 15 years old at most.
Yeah,
this can help
2003. 2003 originated.
2003, so 17 years, still very recent, but it can help a lot with your research. So in this paper, we were 6 co-authors, and of course the review of 1,500 papers takes some time, but there are some iterations. So you first take a look at the abstracts, and then if the abstracts are suitable, you either say yes or no or not sure. And for those which you are not sure, you take a look again to add or not add them, and so on. Okay, so this was our paper, and this was published in a very nice journal, Qualitative Research in Financial Markets. Think it is in the Scopus index, as far as I remember. So it's a good journal for qualitative research in finance. Actually, one of the top journals on that. And yeah, so this was just to give you an example what we did. And of course, you don't need to perform structural literature review, you just need to understand that this type of research exists, and this can help you identify future research directions. First step is, of course, to understand sources from which you define the problem. This can be your own experience. It can be experts that you either know or you would be getting to know them. Deductions from theory, as in the case of the structural literature review, you can have a readily available problem. You can also have a review of the literature, and of course, you should also notice that sources are limited. So maybe when you start the first month, you can't find anything suitable regarding your review, but over time you would be finding out. Don't get frustrated. So what you can also do at this step is to dissect the broad areas into sub-areas of research. When you have these sub-areas of research, you can also have your readings in these sub-areas. So what you can do is just create 2 folders in your computer, one for the papers that you already read, one for those that you didn't read yet. You can create subfolders based on these 2 folders regarding sub-areas and check out which of the folders has most papers. So this also shows you your intuitive interest on which particular sub-area were you interested most without even noticing. The 4th step is the evaluating of the potential of the problem. It's really an important problem to devote your time and resources. Will it really create an impact once you are done with it? Or does it meet the criteria? So your interest should be the most important determinant of your choice. This is very, very important. You can also try to eliminate sub-areas of research where your interest is low, and then try to answer the above listed questions with the remaining topics. So I can present you some criteria that can help you for evaluating the potential of the research problem. Will the findings make a contribution to the body of knowledge? Will findings make a difference for others? Would they lead to definition of new problems or other research directions? Are they really researchable? Do you have any knowledge or experience in the problem area, or do you know someone who has that? Information or data, is it available to you or not? Can you complete it in the allocated time frame? This is also something where people, I think, underestimate the timing issue. So when I was doing my PhD, there was one guy who was doing his PhD since 2004, so since 16 years. He did his PhD he finished his PhD last year in 2019. So it took him 15 years, and don't get me wrong, he didn't have any other job. So his only duty was to do his PhD, and somehow he survived with small scholarships or teaching duties and so on, and of course with family help. But it took him 15 years to finish it. And of course, at the end, the main conclusion of his thesis was, after doing some very complex mathematical calculations, someday any firm can go bankrupt. Do we really need a very complex mathematical model and 15 years for that? I'm not sure. And of course, one thing is to start with small steps. So is it really simple enough for your first study? Or maybe if it is not simple enough, again, do you know some persons who have knowledge and experience in the problem area with whom you can work together? So these can be some of the criteria that can help you to evaluate the potential of the research problem. Step 5 is your research statement, or what will be in your focus in the upcoming months, years, or for my friend, it was decades, 1.5 decades in the same research question. So you need to clarify exactly what you want to determine or solve. This is an exercise also for your own. Why? Because it is possible that over time you need to learn how to define your problem properly. You need to have your scope limited to a specific question or to some sub-questions. For example, in our options pricing case, we only wanted to make a systematic review about what has been researched and what has not been yet researched in the literature of option pricing. And of course, you should remember that research problems are simply problems. So a research statement transforms these problems into behavioral aims by using action-oriented words. For example, finding out, for example, determining, for example, exploring, and so on. So keep that on your focus. Now, there are some tentative and some operational definitions. What is an operational definition? So it defines a concept in terms of the operations or processes that will be used to measure or manipulate the concept. A tentative definition emerges from data collection. So it's not usually included in a list of definitions, but it is, or they are tentative pending visiting the field, settling to gather info. In other words, some concepts we know about, some concepts we don't know yet. They will emerge from our data. So in other words, you don't need to know everything from the start. Some things can emerge from your data. And remember that there is no ready-made recipe for formulating your research statement. Some researchers start from their research statement and then formulate their questions from that research statement. Some researchers are only satisfied with research problems. They are not interested in formulating research statements. Of course, primarily, you decide, but this is not only your own choice. You should consult your institution, your supervisor, and the requirements of these in order to find out what is exactly needed if we are doing in an institutional setup. The same, of course, applies for journals, so you can check whether you want to send it to a journal, what they have previously, what is the type of the paper or the typical paper that is published there. Step 6, you should be having a balance between general and specific in your own problem. So you should be able to avoid trivial problems that are meaningless, something that people also underestimate. It should have a broad area. So when people read it, they would say, okay, this guy made a contribution in the field of strategy, and it should be specific enough to be feasible for the research situation. So maybe you did your work in strategy field, so you are recalled a strategy expert, but specifically you focused on the marketing strategies of local car companies, let's say. Of course, at all times, you should be going back and give some considerations whether or not you are sufficiently interested in the study and whether or not you have the adequate resources. Ask, am I really enthusiastic about this? Ask, what is the general problem and what is the specific problem? And ask, does the specific problem matter? If you are doubtful, go back to previous steps and remember that it is research. It is not a holy book that can never be changed. You can change it. It's your word, it's your decision, and it usually changes no matter how conservative you act on your research. Now, of course, we need to find a balance between general problem and the specific problem. So general objective is an overall statement of the thrust of your study, and the specific problem and the specific objective is what you would like to explore within the framework. So a good balance is, of course, very hard, but you can manage it. So it boils down to two issues. How did you frame your research problem? So maybe you only focused on marketing literature, or maybe you focused on innovation literature. This is the framing issue. How did you frame it? Given your research problem, is there any solution to the specific problem? If no, you can go forward. If yes, you should tell what are you challenging at the specific problem, or are you replicating it with other data? Step 7, format of your problem statement. So how do you state your problem? There should be a question which implies the relationship between two or more variables. There should be a statement which describes the scope of your work. There should be some hypothesis relationships, giving the relationships, as we have seen just one case. And there should be an objective that should be unmeasurable. Step 8 is to understand, is the problem that you stated really researchable? Remember, this is very important, since a problem that is not researchable needs, of course, re-evaluation. Of course, it can also take time to understand whether it is researchable. So if you believe that data would be given to you, but the firm decides not to do, then you have a hard time. Then your research is not researchable. Or you can think, okay, I'm going to do a survey, and my target is to get at least 350 persons who answer it completely, but nobody answers it. Or what one of my friends was doing was that he had some surveys, and he was telling the students, whenever you complete the survey, I would give you 10 additional points. Nice motivation, but what were the students doing? They were just going to the survey, not reading any of the questions, just answering with the number 3. So neither agree nor disagree on everything. And of course, this was horrible. So if you just ask them, maybe not all of them would devote the time, but even if you have a motivation, maybe the data is not usable. So no matter what it is, please do not hesitate to reformulate your research problem. This can happen. And step 9, which is the final step, you should be clear and you should be feasible regarding your problem statement, which is very difficult, but which you can train with people who are not from your field or who did not study at all. So what you should answer is, you should try to understand whether it can be understood by others. Of course, don't get me wrong, you have, of course, a scientific target audience, but even for them, you need to explain it properly, understandably. Another issue is whether you can describe it very clearly, very concisely. So this is something that, in some presentations, some very international, very important conferences, I hear some people and I really don't understand what they're telling, even though I'm from the field. Or maybe they spend a lot of time on trying to explain what you want to do, but then there's no time left for their results. So you should train to explain it as simple and precise as possible. For example, how Dr. Gagan explained our paper to you is a very good example on that. Of course, he's very experienced, a very good presenter, very important scholar. But if you are at the start, just try to simplify what you are saying. And we would be training on that. And one of the issues is that, do you really demonstrate an understanding of the area being investigated and studied? So, of course, maybe you make a very nice presentation, but in the question and answer sessions, people notice that you don't really understand the topic. So if they ask you about one of the most important papers written on that, and you say that I didn't hear about it, or you try to answer it, but they notice that you didn't hear about it, it means this is not good. So, of course, don't get me wrong, you can skip some of the papers, so it's not possible for you to have an understanding of all the papers. But one of the things that you can do, and I think there's a session on databases, is to check how many times has a paper been cited by others. So citations, I think Dr. Gagan also told you, can be an important measure. So what is the most cited paper from that area that you are referring to? So, for example, if you go to the Google Scholar and if you type, let's say, strategy as a topic, or if you type, if you type evolutionary economics as a topic, you would see most cited papers. So, for example, I can see by Giovanni Dozzi, a paper on technological paradigms has been cited 10,230 times. Okay, so apparently this is something that people pay a lot of attention on. So you should be able to cite it as well. Maybe at the end you would be noticing that your research is completely different from his. That's okay. But you know the most important papers. Now, what is the goal of the elevator pitch? I already told you that this should be your second homework for the session on Monday, where we would be training a lot on defining the research problem. So our goal there is to create a memorable and a positive impression regarding your research paper problem and to open the door to further conversation about your research problem. You should be answering the following questions. So now that we learned how to define a research problem and how to define a research statement, this should be your research statement. First question is, what is the topic of your research? And you can start with that. That's why I gave you the first homework. My study is about ... So you can use a single sentence for that. What is the problem, the issue, or the question that you are asking and addressing in your research? So this is important. This is your research problem. We just learned how to define it. So use the knowledge from that. I can also provide the slides. What is that problem interesting and important? So, I mean, maybe you have a research problem, but nobody cares about it. So it's not something relevant. It's not something applicable. It's not something that would contribute to our knowledge. And finally, how does your connect with a broader disciplinary conversation about this topic or this problem in your field? And what does it add to that conversation? In other words, what is the added value? So you would be devoting your time for that, but what is the added value for that? Okay, so I mean, the questions seem to be quite straightforward, but you would be noticing that, of course, there could be some of the things that you require simplifying. In order to help you to simplify your answers, remember it should be, as the name suggests, a short presentation, short and precise answers. You should pay attention to your language. So you should be able to use some key nouns, to offer topical touchstones that are accessible to a wide range of educated people. You should be able to avoid the jargon if possible, or deliver some specialized term using appositive. Also, there should be some action verbs. So express relationships among these key nouns using action verbs. For example, just to stick to the example of Kanwaljit, he said, what is the impact of diversification on banking? He is proposing in his hypothesis that the impact is a positive direction. So having an impact is, for example, an action verb expressing relationships among these nouns. You should be also describe the movement of your work and the activity or the action of your involvement. For example, what are you going to do? Maybe you are going to first do the data conduction together with the literature review. Then you would be analyzing your data and you would be drawing some conclusions, maybe, let's say, for practitioners, but also for the theory. So these are all the issues that are quite important for all of us. And finally, of course, when one of you would be presenting on Monday, I want the others to act like evaluators so that we can also get some feedback. So I want, of course, we can train it beforehand, but when you are listening to one of your colleagues' presentation, elevator pitch, remember, what are the words stuck out to you as the most important? What intrigued you? Were you confused at any point? What might the speaker have emphasized more or less? Did they respond appropriately to your verbal or physical cues? So these are all the issues that I want you to remember when you are listening to a talk. And of course, for the speaker, so you can practice it a little bit when you are done first. Remember, when you are doing the first exercise, take a look at whether you got all your key points across. Did you get asked what you expected to be asked? So this is something that should be done on Monday. And were you able to remain in the moment? So something called stage fright can cause a little bit difficulties, or maybe you lose your concentration, you had a bad night, you couldn't sleep because of too much coffee, and so on. So how can you remain in the moment? This is something also that influences your communication with the others. Now, for Monday, as I told earlier, first I want you to talk a little bit about your study, and then do this elevator pitch with the following questions. What is your topic? What is the problem? What is the problem or issue? Why is it interesting and important? And how does your work connect with a broader disciplinary conversation? And what can you add? So remember, it should be short. It should be short. Why? Because in presentations, in conversations, people usually don't have any time. I mean, I have the time, don't get me wrong, but you should be able to express your thoughts in a very short time, as clear as possible. That's why we should be having a very short overview of the questions. That's why the elevator pitch. So think of yourselves. You are at your university, you would be going to the 9th floor with the elevator. It should be as short as the time you are spending on elevator with someone else who asks you, what are you doing anyway? Okay, from my side, these were the insights and these were the issues that I wanted to share with you. What would you like to share? If there are any questions or anything that is not clear, I would be glad to answer, of course.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Professor. This is Pooja Jain from Sri Aurobindo College. I have a question. May I ask?
Yes, of course, Pooja.
So just like the paper that was shown to us by Dr. Gagandeep, sir, in that, if we were to take that paper as an example, and if somebody would ask what was the problem that you were trying to study in this paper, and if you were to answer in just maybe a sentence or two, then how would you define the problem? What would be the problem statement that you will tell to somebody who's asking this?
Of course, our problem or our study was about noticing the concept of plasticity in neuroscience and in economics, and how we can use plasticity in order to evaluate humans' decision makings. So this should be a theoretical framework for understanding the decision making processes using plasticity, so to say.
Yeah, okay. That means problem statement is not just writing about the problem word per se, literally, not taking that word problem first, but it is just defining that what is the major purpose or major objective or major thing that you will be studying in that paper. So that is what I got to understand from the problem statement.
Of course. So research problem and research statement, they are two different things. So in the research problem, you just define what is the research gap. So what is something that somebody did not answer yet? This was the case with our research, with both of the researches that we shared with you. But it can be also possible that you can say, okay, I'm challenging these assumptions in that paper. So this is just the research problem. The research statement, on the other hand, not only includes the problem, but also the solution that you are proposing in order to solve the problem. Does this help you,
Okay.
Pooja?
Yeah, sir. Thank you so
Very
much. Yeah,
good.
it was pretty clear. Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
I
much.
you.
can add to that by giving another example if you want me to.
Yeah, sir,
So
please.
yeah, so recently we worked on a paper which is communicated now to International Journal of Emerging Markets. In this paper, uh, before I come to the objective or research statement of the paper, let me explain you a bit about the theoretical framework and the theoretical modeling, to which this contributed. There is a theory called sustainable investment, which says that the investors, when you make your investments in the stock markets, you look at the profits, you look at the profit potential, which stock would give you more profit. There is an alternate investment which is coming up these days known as sustainable investment or impact investment or responsible investment, which says that the investors not only look for the profit, but they also look for wherever they are investing, is this company where I am investing, is this company contributing to the number one, environment, number two, society, number three, governance. So this framework is called ESG framework of sustainable investment. This is a given theory. This is a well-built theory, environment, society, governance theory of sustainable investment. Now, this research of ours, uh, we wanted to see that if an investor shifts from conventional investment to sustainable investment, of course, he is caring for the environment, caring for the society, caring for the governance, and caring for the bigger causes. But does this care have a financial cost? Means, does he need to forego a part of his financial gains because the conventional indexes would have got him higher financial returns, while here his financial returns would be lower. So while on one hand he's getting non-financial returns by the returns for the cause of sustainability because he's investing in those companies which are more concerned towards environment, towards society, towards governance. So this concern of his, this pursuit of his, does it come at a financial cost? So our research problem was simple. So I had to explain this in such a long paragraph to you because I wanted to make you aware of the ESG framework. But broadly, our problem was simple. Our problem was that an investor who shifts from conventional investment avenues to sustainable investment avenues, does he got to forego part of his financial returns? So this was our problem, and the context, I hope you are clear about it. So we were contributing to the existing theory of ESG theory of sustainable investment, and we wanted to go a step further than the existing researches and see what are the financial costs of investment. And also, since Burak talked about the titles of the papers, so our title of this paper is there a cost of sustainable investment? Is there a cost for sustainable investments? I hope you can gather something from this example.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
I think, thank you, Gagan. Very interesting case. I also found the title of your paper, Doing Well by Doing Good, also quite interesting. And I think it also has already some citations, which was a systematic review on sustainable investment again, wasn't it?
That is correct, Burak. So yeah, that's also for all of you. I mean, interesting titles help a lot. So this paper was titled "Doing Well by Doing Good," and this was also about sustainable investment. And this was a systematic literature review. And since Burak mentioned about systematic literature review, let me share with you and add to this that in one of the future classes where Mansi and Anshita are supposed to talk to you, Isha will also join, Isha Garg, she will also join, and they will also reflect upon the systematic literature reviews because all of them have published very good systematic literature reviews so far. So they'll guide you towards reviewing the literature, which is a very important component of your research paper.
Gagan sir, there is a question here with regard to this
Please go on.
the research problem that you just shared on sustainable investment. Can you tell us what will be the research statement in this case now?
So I would want you to build a research statement now. You know my research problem. So
Yes.
Burak already explained what is research statement. If you say Burak can repeat what he said about research statement, and then you frame your the research statement for my problem.
Yes.
Of course. So remember, we talked a little bit about research, the difference between research problem and the research statement. So research problem was the initial problem that you noticed and that you wanted to talk about. So the research statement itself is what will be your focus. So what is the thing that you would like to determine or that you would like to solve? What is your scope and what is actually the plan? So what would you like to solve, with what methods, with what question, and in what context? So this is what the research statement should give you. And I think now you can try it on your own. Gagan's interesting paper can be a good example, as Gagan said.
So can you try and formulate the research statement for this paper now?
Of course. So
I'm asking the lady. Sorry,
yes.
Oh, of course. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I'm still confused between research title and research statement. I'm thinking that these two are the same thing.
No, research
title is also representing the research statement that I want to formulate out of this problem. Is it?
Research title is the title of the paper. Simple as that.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, research statement is, as Burak said, which tells you about what exactly are you going to do, what is going to be your method, and what are you going to contribute to the existing literature. So for example, let me clarify. For my research, the research that we just talked about, my research statement would be something like this, that we want to contribute to the body of knowledge in the field of sustainable investment by further investigating whether sustainable investment avenues, whether investors in sustainable investment avenues need to forego a part of their financial return. Right. This is one sentence, full stop. Now, the second sentence goes, we do it by studying five indexes, sustainable indexes and five conventional indexes, and applying a certain methodology to those indexes to test the conditional return and conditional volatility. So these two sentences make my research statement. Monica, are you okay with it?
Yes, sir. I got it. Thank you so much. Got it, sir.
Yeah. Over to you back, Burak.
Thank you very much. This is a very interesting case, Gagan. I can also give another example from the Higher Education Institute. So I wrote one paper with my colleague Tuber Kaya, the knowledge management specialist, and this paper was published in in Electronic Journal on Knowledge Management. So this was about the use of social media by lecturers in different universities. So our problem, our research problem itself was that we didn't really know whether social media was contributing to the research and teaching practices of researchers and lecturers at the universities. So we wanted to understand whether social media can be used as a tool to gather knowledge and share knowledge regarding the research and teaching. And our research statement can be as follows. So in order to understand whether social media can be used as a tool to gather research, to gather knowledge and to share knowledge regarding research or teaching, we made a survey and a data analysis regarding these issues in two different countries, in two different universities, to find out how lecturers perceive social media, how they use it, and how we can contribute to to an international literature on knowledge management regarding better usage of social media in educational institutions in higher education. Long one, but just to give you an idea, I mean, in the field, of course, this isn't shorter in the paper, but just to give you an idea on that. Any further questions?
Okay, so next question.
I'm sorry, I can hear very bad.
Am I audible now,
I cannot hear proper, I'm sorry.
Hello. Hello.
I cannot hear, unfortunately, maybe a written question, because I could hear very bad and then there was no voice.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, now I can hear.
Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, I'm hearing now.
Sir, with respect to what Dr. Gagan and you have just said about sustainable investments, I just want to add more on it. As you were saying that the titles, if they're catchy, then they really get published. I will really second that because my research area is sustainable itself, sustainable investment itself. And the topic which was accepted for publication in FDP journal was it was not an investment if it is destroying the planet.
With what? I'm sorry, I lost your voice.
Hello?
What was the topic of your research? Sorry, I lost the voice. It was about sustainable investment.
Sir, it was sustainable investment only. And the title was, it is not an investment if it is destroying the planet.
Very, very good.
So
very catchy title.
Thank you, sir.
Where was it published?
In respect to, sir, it is established in, it has been published in Management of Environmental Quarterly ABDC Category Journal.
Very nice. Congratulations on that. I mean,
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
It's a very, very good case. So if it is, it's not an investment if it is damaging the earth.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
of course, this is also something cultural. So you couldn't be publishing such a title, a research with such a title in a German journal or in a West European journal. They want more precise and, more formal titles like, I don't know, the role of sustainable investments on earth or something like that. I'm not sure how it is in Indian journals, or can we conclude anything about that? So,
it's not an Indian journal. It's a journal which is published by, it is a journal which is published by UK.
Yeah, no, I know about that. I was just asking what is the culture in the Indian journals regarding titles? So more catchy and funny titles or more formal titles? That was my question. Or can we generalize
Indian journals are not very much. We actually cannot generalize, I think. It's a mix and match, you can say. But probably what my experience says is that they are not very much interested to see the catchy titles. They are just also interested for very clear and straightforward titles.
Thank you very much for these interesting contributions.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any other question? Hello.
Hello.
So I feel there is no other questions which faculty want to ask. So on behalf of Shri Aurobindo College of Commerce and Management, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to you, sir, for sharing your knowledge with us. Because with our session today, we got to know that how the research problem should be framed and what is the exact difference between the research statement and the research problem. Otherwise, as a beginner, we used to get confused between the both. So, again, once again, on behalf of the teaching fraternity who is attending your workshop, so I extend a hearty vote of thanks to you, sir. I'm looking forward. We are looking forward to you again on Monday, and I'm sure everyone will be ready with the answers that you have given to us.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be in contact with everyone participating. Very interesting words, and thanks a lot from my side. I hope it made as much fun to you as to me.
एक मिनट मैंने यहाँ पे 8 साढ़े 8 तक बैठना मुझे नहीं पता भी रुक जाओ
Fine, thank you, sir.
This is probably getting the family time, and the kids speaking is
Yes.
a reminder of that, no?
Okay. Then, okay, and thank you, Gagan, of course, for your contributions. These were very insightful. So then I suppose we would be seeing each other virtually on Monday.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, Burak. Thank you very much for sparing the time. I know how busy you have been. And
It's a pleasure.
yeah, look forward to
always
see
a
you back
pleasure.
on Monday. Yeah,
Thank you
look
very
forward to
much.
see you back on Monday.
Thank you, Gagan. Take good care, everyone, and see you on Monday.
Bye-bye. Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone.